Hello, New Zealand. Welcome to Straight Talk. This is episode number 58. And tonight we discuss New Zealand's obsession with prescribing puberty blockers for confused children. Trust in the media continues to deteriorate. We ask the panellists, can the media recover the love? The government declares war on waggers, and they also declare war on teacher-only days. Is it Commissioner Costa or Cuddles Costa? We'll ask the panel that one. Labor refloats the policy of a capital gains tax, and should gang patches be banned? Let's check out the panel tonight, and it's another handsome and pretty lot. Firstly, Simon O'Connor, on my left as always. How are you, Simon?
Oh, I was just thinking it's very, very gendered comments there. But actually, I'm going to usurp the microphone for a moment. I got to meet some amazing people down at the March for Life in Christchurch who are great followers of this show. So to Robin and Delwyn, to Lynette and a whole lot of others, greetings to you. And I'm pleased that you prefer me as a panellist to Bob, guys. Thanks. I'll keep that to myself.
Okay, and on your left, Dr. Ate Moala in Wellington. How are you, Ate? Oh, turn your microphone on, Ate. Your husband, Mark, needs training. Have we got you there? Oh, there we are. We got you. That's okay.
Yeah. No, I'm good. Thank you. Happy that spring is here.
Okay. And lovely flag in the black background there. Below you is Alapomalele. How are you? Did you get some sleep last night?
Evening, everyone. Yes, I did. I am getting sleep. So thank you for checking in, Bob.
How many weeks to go before number 2?
Oh, I'm only in my second trimester, so
is that all?
I'll let you know when my water's close to breaking.
Okay. As long as it's not in the office, I'll be fine with that. Rodney Hyde in Queenstown. Has the sun actually set there yet, Rodney, or is it still sort of middle of the day?
No, it's still going down. It's just on twilight, but the sun's still just over the hill.
Okay. Look, just a quick question around the panel. I just want to know, Simon, are you allowed to work from home, unlike the public service?
Yeah, I am, mainly because I'm maybe not operating publicly or serving anyone.
Or you got a nice boss. Ate, are you allowed to work at home?
Yes.
Yes.
But I get distracted doing my washing and everything else but my work, but I can work from home.
Okay. Ala, you got a nice boss?
He's all right. I do work from home. It's the only way to function as a first-time mama, so I'm thankful for the arrangement.
Okay. And Rodney, you're doing a bit of live talkback now, so you're not at home. You got to go into work, don't you?
Oh, yes. We've got a studio, and I got to go into the studio. So, no, my days of working in my slippers are long gone.
Yeah, although I knew 6 o'clock newsreaders that had the suit on the top half and they had beach shorts and jandals when they were presenting the news. I must ask Peter Williams about that. The other question I wanted to ask, Jacinda Ardern is getting $200,000 for every speaking engagement. Simon, how much did you get paid to MC the March for Life in Christchurch on Saturday?
I did it for free. It might have even cost me, but no, I was happy to do it. Things like that, it's important to stand up for your values. So yeah, not a cent.
Okay, we won't mock you about the fact that you're not getting $200,000 per speaking engagement. Rodney, do you still get paid to speak?
No. I'm never a fan of being paid to speak, to be honest, but good luck to her. To be honest, I feel very sorry for her because she's a twisted soul. And I think, sadly, she's actually a very unhappy woman, I suspect. I feel sorry for her, deeply sorry for her.
Yeah, I was reading her just part of the story, and she spends a lot of the time in the US, hasn't seen her husband Clark for quite a while. It doesn't sound like a great existence, like you say, but okay, moving on. Those were just 2 quick questions. I just asked the politicians, Mala and Ate, it's nothing personal, it's just as ex-politicians, I was just interested to know whether they were up with Jacinda Ardern. Obviously not. Our image of the week is actually, well, we're very excited about this because it's actually our new staff member, James Williams, who is a journalist and is a researcher and a presenter, and he has joined our staff. So Family First has expanded. We've sort of got like this quasi-newsroom. He's going to be writing articles, putting the narrative in from a conservative viewpoint to counter what's in the mainstream media. So we're very excited. So that's why that's our image of the week. Our video of the week. Now, you'll remember a couple of weeks ago when Trump talked about that town where they were eating the dogs and eating the cats, and some guy made a rap video out of that and has made megabucks out of it, apparently. Just a reminder, this is what it was.
Springfield, they're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Yeah, now apparently it went viral, very, very popular, but there's a new one out, and it's about Kamala Harris being the border czar. And what's interesting is that she uses the Puli Fuimana song, who's a South Side boy. I know his family very well. And it's How Bizarre. Have a watch.
From the wackos on the left to the MAGAs on the right, they know I'm beating Kamala. This race won't even be tied. Her policies are nutso. She's out her goddamn mind. She just repeats the same thing, regurgitating her lines. She thinks that immigration without paperwork is good. Clearly not too much power underneath Kamala's hood. Borders are, it's what you are. Borders are. Cackling Kamala, you're dumb. Mass inflation imminent if she weasels herself in. If that don't sound like fun to you, then you better help me win. I promise I'll secure you, you'll be in better hands. It'd be a flippin' free-for-all with what Kamala plans. Borders are, it's what you are. Borders are. Laugh it up, Kamala. This lady.
Oh, there we are. That's going to really upset the music pundits in New Zealand using a New Zealand song, but that one's gone viral as well. So we're just balancing it and making sure we're even-minded here on Straight Talk. All right, let's get into the first topic, and it was actually one that I threw at you because of news over the weekend. And as reported by Family First, did I tell you that we now have a real journalist on the team? Gender dysphoric Kiwi kids are the most medicated in the world. The New Zealand Medical Journal published a report, and it shows basically that our puberty blockers prescription is absolutely going through the roof, and it's 11 times higher compared to the UK and the Welsh per head of population. Now, interestingly, just to see the New Zealand Medical Journal said that the main reasons for the higher prescribing were that we had easier access to assessment, a lower threshold for diagnosis of gender dysphoria, and a greater likelihood of recommending puberty blockers and other treatments like counselling, which might be far better. Interesting just to see how the media reported it. Before I come to you, panel, New Zealand Herald were correct. They said puberty blocker use in New Zealand is far higher than similar countries. So well done to the New Zealand Herald. But then we went to the Post, which is in Christchurch, and they said the use of puberty blockers declines. They're basing it purely on that little blink right at the end. Anyway, Dr. Ate Moala, I've got to come to a doctor first. Why is New Zealand obsessed with puberty blockers and chemicalising our kids?
Unfortunately, New Zealand is and is just the place to go when you want to experiment with people's lives, especially the kids, where there's intentional targeting of the children, and there is complete ignoring of the scientific evidence that over 95% of kids who go through gender dysphoria, by the time they come through the teen, they are fine. They go back to their original biological sex when they have no problem. Unfortunately, this information is not passed on to the children, and then of course the law forbid anybody from talking to the kids. So I think it's just another wake-up call for our parents and caregivers. We just have to talk to the children, our children, and make sure that they understand, because no one else is, and they're being targeted.
Yeah. Okay, Ala, does it surprise you, and any idea why the little blip right at the end?
No, it doesn't surprise me with the sort of lax nature of prescribing and obviously the loose regulation of the use of the particular drug. I'm always interested in how parents arrive at letting their children take this particular drug, knowing that it does have irreversible effects, fertility-wise, and even just sort of endocrinologically as well. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't presume that doctors they intend to harm children. I'm pretty sure Ate can testify that every practitioner or doctor takes that oath, the Hippocratic oath, and they vow to value and preserve life. So I don't think it's doctors. I would say there are a few sketchy health professionals within the gender medicine that are really pushing even research to try affirm the use of puberty blockers, but we're we're seeing it across in the West, in similar countries, that everybody's turning their back on it except for us. And so it's time for the Ministry of Health and Te Whatuora to sort of like get up with the play, which is no more puberty blockers.
Yeah. I think it's a very small minority, isn't it? I mean, we've actually got a unit just around from our office that is the main one for the whole of Auckland. And it's a bit like euthanasia and abortion, isn't it? There's that small remnant of medical professionals who have sort of lost sight of what their oath of their Hippocratic oath is. Rodney, does this get your blood pressure boiling when you see these stats?
Through the roof. And I'm not as Christian as our other panelists, because this is the responsibility of every adult in authority. I don't think we can say it's a minority, because the grim reality is there's no institutions, there's no organisations, there's no adults in authority that are speaking out against this. If we took out family first, there'd be a deafening silence in this respect. Every teacher, every doctor, every politician, they're all going along with it. Why? Because they're not speaking out. Now, to anyone looking at this, they can see that this is criminal, because they're taking underage kids, prepubescent kids, and basically sterilizing them and giving them drugs that affect their mind and their bodies for years to come. Why is it a big uptick? I think that's a question for the ages. Personally, I believe it's a spiritual issue where we truly have lost our way as a society, and we're prepared to sacrifice our children for our own ends. Why the drop? Well, it wasn't that long ago that the medical authorities were saying that these drugs were entirely harmless, and that all a kid could do is take these pills, and they would simply delay puberty for a little while, and once they worked out what they wanted to be, they could stop the pills and just start their puberty afresh. Anyone with half a brain could see that was absolute nonsense. And of course, that got reversed, and I think that might have done the downtick. Also, we know that parents, loving parents, were told that their kid was gender dysphoric. And if they didn't go through with this sterilization, which in a bizarre thing, and again, all doctors go along with this, they call it gender affirming care, the child will likely suicide. What a terrible thing to be telling children. Our medical authorities, our politicians, our Ministry of Health, our schools have all been on this train, too scared to speak out, because to speak out is to potentially lose your job and your career. Well, if they had any moral backbone, they would lose their job and their career, because this is little kids' lives. And I have to say, no one disgusts me more over this than Mr. Chris Luxon, because he's in the immediate driver's seat to do something about it. I don't believe for a minute that he thinks this is right. He's not spoken up.
Okay, Simon, why do you think there's a apprehension to do anything about this issue when the stats are so damning, and there's just that massive mountain which suggests that actually it's not a medical problem? It seems to be a cultural, everybody opting in, peer pressure almost.
I think there's a number of reasons, and my other three, colleagues here tonight have touched on them. I mean, one part of it is when you're dealing with lies, when you're dealing with something based on falsity, like this gender affirming care is, you've got to become more and more absurd. And so, in this space in New Zealand, more and more puberty blockers are prescribed, and you'll see down the line more and more surgeries. And so those who are participating in the lie, in the absurdity, and I'm talking from the medical profession, I'm sad to say I don't share the same optimism around these doctors. I think they are taken in by the money, they're taken in by ideology, and they're taken in by novelty. And also, by the way, most of them don't take the Hippocratic Oath anymore. But to live the lie, you've got to become more absurd. And then I think the secondary element which kicks in is that New Zealand sort of thinks of itself as exceptional. And we're an amazing country, and without sounding disloyal, we seem to think that what we do down here is, as I say, exceptional, something different from the rest of the world. Well, when the rest of the world, like the UK and Scandinavian countries and others, have put the handbrake on very strongly around gender-affirming care in general, not just the medical sterilization through chemicals, we think we're different. And you're seeing that in New Zealand's equivalent of WPATH, what we call PATHA. They're arguing that we're somehow different. The thing is, we're not. And I just want to finally put an underline and underscore what Rodney said. It's beyond sickening what these supposed doctors are telling parents, which is, if you don't do this to your children, if you don't effectively abuse your children through sterilizing drugs, they'll kill themselves. Now, that's patently false. It's observably false, but it's quite sick. And without then ending being too dramatic, I think in probably 5 or 10 years, we'll be looking back on this as a terrible medical crime. And many will ask how politicians, how medical leaders let this happen.
Okay, lots of comments coming through. Let's just check them out. Firstly, Lynette said, "Great to meet you at the march, Simeon."
Oh, Lynette, so close. Simeon Brown looks so much younger than me.
Yeah. Rosie says, Tom Bradley, who read the news, and I know personally as well, had a suit jacket, shirt and a tie, and yes, he wore jeans as well. Delwyn got it right. Simon did a great job at the March for Life too. Nice to meet you, Simon. Kevin says there was a big restaurant in Manukau that was closed because what was found in the freezer.
What?
What topic did that relate to? Was that about South Side? I mean, just because a good song comes out of the South Side doesn't mean that the restaurants are serving up dodgy stuff. I mean, Ali, you're on the South Side, aren't you? Kirstine said, forego flatting conflicts with your show, Bob. It's hard to know what to watch. Very rare to get such quality programming on TV1. I still elected to watch this. We'll watch that later. Great decision. Joshua says the parents are the problem, mate. Daryl says even the Herald is starting to print reservations on puberty blockers. They have a lot to answer for on this issue. Justine says maybe if the church spoke out a lot more about it, I mean making a big noise about it, but like abortion and euthanasia, the church remains silent. Well, some of them do. Evil abounds where good people do nothing. Pene says people are afraid to actually say what they really think because of the cancel culture society we live in. It's time we all speak up. And Craig says, New Zealand has become what the USA once was, the home of weird ideas that snowball into the absolute bizarre, but to question the bizarre is bizarre. Which, how bizarre? Or maybe that's what the song is. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, team. And the Stats NZ have come out with asking people how they rate institutional trust on a 0 to 10 scale. 0 is no trust and 10 is complete trust. And as you can see there, people had the least trust in the media out the right there at 4.3, down from 4.9 just 5 years ago. Let me just show you that close up. So you can see it's dropped there, even just in the last year, that green out the far right. But you'll also notice, Simon and Rodney, that trust in Parliament decreased the most last year compared with other institutions. So maybe I can just start, Ate, can the media ever recover the love, or do you think the trust in the media is kind of, the inertia is building and it's just all downhill? I mean, I still think that they can win back trust if they just show a bit of reasonableness and openness and not be so biased, but can they do that? Can they recover the love?
I think there are those who believe anything the media says, and then there are those who will never believe, like me. will never believe anything that the media says. I think part of the problem is that New Zealand has just tolerated the lies that the media has dished out, and it's more and more that they're just going for a story instead of checking the sources, and they just want to get a quick story out. And then when the truth comes out, they don't even apologize. So, and of course, there's a lot of in the media are just so left-leaning and woke. And it's very obvious now that they give their opinion rather than giving the facts and letting people make up their mind and what is right and true. So it's very hard now to come across any people who investigated, the reporters. They're just giving their opinion. So it's absolutely disgusting, actually. So I'm not sure why people listen to the media.
Simon, do you think they can win back some trust? I mean, do you think they can reverse this decline, or is it slippery slope out of control now?
I think for mainstream media, it's a case of they're going to have to bottom out before they recover in a new form. In other words, I think that they're destined to fail. That's as much to do with how they report as actually the models they're operating under, I think, are too old. So in other words, the mainstream media, the legacy media that we know today is going to die out. But I'd want to caveat that with we do need a good, strong media. Conceptually, that's really, really important. So, there's part of me which says, trying to think the charitable way to say this, they deserve this. Not all in every journalist, but as a collective, they deserve this. They're bringing about their own failure. But there's another part of me, Bob, that says we still need good media. And you're seeing some good, green shoots. We've just talked about puberty blockers, and to acknowledge Rodney, what he's been doing on Reality Check Radio, for example. And that whole station, the work that you're doing here through Family First, we are seeing alternative media in the best sense of that phrase coming through. But no, I think our legacy media is just going to find lower and lower trust, and as I say, their business models are broken, and they'll collapse, basically.
Rodney, you might want to comment on the media, but also do you want to comment on politicians? I mean, trust in both of those institutions is declining.
I don't think the legacy media can recover. I don't think they have an appetite for it. And I think they will just die off. I think it's very sad, like Simon, but I don't see within them the ability to get back to a concept of telling the truth, of admitting errors, and attempting a lack of bias. It's a great opportunity because look at Family First, look at Reality Check Radio. Family First, Bob, how careful do you have to be not to have something wrong, because you would be jumped on if you had anything wrong? And so you take a great more care about the work that you do and the facts that you present than our media ever would. So I think it's sad that we've lost a legacy media. I've lost a great pleasure. I've lost a great window into the world, being able to read the newspaper or watch the news and to have a sense that I knew what was happening around the world. I don't get that now. Worrying is the loss of trust in our parliament. This is not a loss of trust in government, it's in our parliament. And I think that's very, very dangerous, and I can understand it, because I think what's happened in this last little while is we've lost the concept of truth. So truth is just relative to who you are, it's relative to power, and you have your own truth. And our politicians are happily bought into that because it suits them. And we have a system now in our parliament where there's not a contest of ideas. So you'd normally expect a yin and a yang where there'd be robust debate, but more often than not, on the big issues of the day, like puberty blockers, they maintain an incredible silence. Or on the big issues of the day, like climate change, they may maintain a consensus. And if you see through this, there's no one representing you. And I think this is dangerous because parliamentary democracy is a wonderful thing to allow political debate to be settled without violence. But if we lose our confidence in our parliamentary system, we open the way to tin pot dictators and tyranny. And I think it absolutely follows from a loss of belief in truth, and it follows from an ability to speak freely. And we no longer feel as though we can speak freely, and we no longer have a concept of truth. And I think Parliament is the poorer because of that.
Okay. Did you have lunch with Bruce Logan or something? Because you're starting to use really big sentences and I'm really having to concentrate.
Yes, I'm filling in for Bruce. He says, I'm a bit young and I've got a lot to learn, but I got this chorus out for half an hour before coming on the show.
Well done.
And he said, he told me this, never put a full stop in the sentence because Bob will cut you off.
Yes, well said. Ala, I mean, is it, do you agree with the others? I mean, they're basically saying that the media can't recover the love. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's hard not to agree in light of what's happening with our legacy media. I really don't care for legacy media. I've said that over and over. I only care for radio, and I hope radio survives, but everything else can just go right into the rubbish. And also, I haven't consumed our legacy media for a number of years now. I get my news from social media. So I think that's a big part of the picture that we're not talking about, is that a large number of people, especially young people, if you're under 40, I reckon, or 45, I could be ageist, but I don't care, are getting their, consuming their news from social media. So they're obviously current media models are contesting with that. And obviously the past, in New Zealand in particular, the past few years, we've just seen the media be ugly towards having open debate and discussion around things like COVID. They've actually been part of the misinformation, actually driving it. So there's this, they've just sort of dug their own grave, maybe a little bit. And obviously the lack of transparency in terms of relationships with the government under Labor, so that hasn't helped. But I guess to add on to Rodney's point about loss of trust in our politicians, I'm not sure anybody ever trusts politicians, obviously just the ones of character and integrity and morals. But this has been a trend in the West for a long time, for a decade, maybe for the past decade, in terms of political trust going down into the loo. Excuse me. But I mean, obviously the COVID era in New Zealand really did a number for the public and how politicians treated its citizens, our country's citizens. And so it makes sense that if there's a lack of character and competency in our politicians, I wouldn't trust it. I like the public wouldn't trust them. So, I think we've also seen an abuse of parliamentary functions in terms of the passing bills with urgency, etc. And it just feels like they're not listening and they no longer represent the public. So it just makes sense that it's going to decline. So I'm hoping, at least, because I've said that we've had a generation of really dud politicians, I'm hopeful that the next generation will have at least a brain and heart, maybe.
Well, just to reassure you, I mean, in this article about Jacinda Ardern, she's been speaking to your audiences about successful governance, leadership, and her work to combat online extremism. And, the rest of the world just thinks that her leadership has been amazing. I watched a little clip from her with the editor of Time magazine interviewing her, and I finally figured out why Time magazine's going through the floor because, it was just gushing praise on Jacinda Ardern. So it was quite interesting to watch. Anyway, that's just going to really wind up people. So let's just check what people have said. James says, sorry, I can't watch or support any platform that has an Israeli supporter on it. Oh, that must be for you, Arte. Oh, well, bye, James. Liz says, no longer trust the mainstream media, and even if they did start reporting the truth, I think their time is over. They have cooked their goose. Lisa says, only balanced factual reporting can redeem their reputation. It's a good question. Addie, it's not a question, but good question if they could do it. Addie says, thank you all for speaking the truth on our behalf. New Zealand Kiwi says, lamestream media needs to be dumped, gutted and reboot. Gosh, it sounds like a fish. With journalists and reporters who tell the whole story, sick of the lies, twisting of words, independent media is so real. Correct. Kathy says, I love listening to RCR and Family First, Leighton Smith's podcast every Wednesday. Also has great interviews on relevant and important issues worth a listen to. And, here's someone who's been a bit brainwashed. Tina says, the only politician I trusted was Simon. Woo,
Simon Bridges. Oh, that's brilliant. I'll let him know.
That's what it is. Right, let's move on. We're doing fantastic team, and we're cracking down on wagging and on teacher-only days. I'll come back to the teacher-only days because I'm interested in that one, but this is what Associate Education Minister David Seymour said in a new truancy crackdown on Q&A on Sunday, and it's pretty hard to argue against what he says, actually.
Yeah, you got 8 to 10% of students in any given term who are chronically absent. So that's something like 60 to 80,000 students that they're trying to chase around. Now, that's a
illness
lot.
plays a big part in that.
Chronically absent means that you're missing more than 3 weeks in a 10-week term. So if there are children that are ill for 3 weeks, then my heart goes out to them and we sympathise. But I don't think that explains 60 to 80,000.
But it might make up some of the absence that then applies to the chronically absent title, right?
It certainly could. Yeah. But at the same time, if you go back 10 years, the same figure was only about 4%. So
I don't think anyone's disputing that there's a problem.
So either there's been a major shift in illness, and if that's true, we should really look at that. But what appears to have happened is that right across society, education has become a lower priority on the totem pole. And what the government is really trying to do with our various initiatives is say, look, up to you ultimately, but at the end of the day, the success of our society and the people in it is going to depend on how much knowledge we pass from one generation to the next. And the most...
Okay, so pretty hard to argue about what he's saying. He's saying that if it's 5 days absent, it will trigger... Basically, school contacts the parents and guardians, finds out what's going on. 10 days absent, then meet with the parents and guardians and maybe OT and the local police, truancy officer get involved. 15 days absent, then it could be possible prosecution of parents. How much is it down to the parents? Ala, I'll start with you as a new parent. Your kid's going to be at school every day?
No, I plan to homeschool. I don't like public schooling. I have no trust in our current schooling system. Our education system's just gone down the toilet again. Another issue that's gone down the toilet. I personally think this particular policy is stupid. This is probably one of the dumbest policies I've seen in a long time. The reporting has been misleading. There are, in terms of chronic absenteeism, the whole attendance issue, the fact that they're going to start prosecuting parents, that's always been in play. I don't know if people realise that, but it has been up to schools. Schools get to decide whether they get to pursue prosecution with parents. The difference now is that onus now falls on the Ministry of Education. There is a multitude of reasons that underlie the stats that we're seeing. Obviously, in some parts of New Zealand, there are factors that are outside of schools' control in terms of family dynamics, socioeconomic status. So I hate when we report on things like this when we don't give the full picture, and we haven't been seeing the full picture. And also some schools they suck. And so and bullying comes into it, there's a plethora of issues that weren't present a decade ago, and we're not talking about that. And these are real issues as well. And so some sort of slapping a policy that's going to slap parents on the hand, I don't know if that'll make a big difference. I like that it's bringing up the conversation around prosecuting parents and the role of parents in getting their children to school. But half the battle is that it's outside the school's controls. And so I'm glad that it's raising this conversation, because it also means there are other agencies that need to come into the fold that need to be supported. So it's a, what is it called? Like an interagency solution here. So it's not just MOE education problem. I will say that this should shake up MOE, because what the heck have they been doing over the past decade in terms of attendance? I don't know if daily attendance reporting is the way to go, and monitoring. And so it just seems this particular policy just seems there's a mismatch. There's a mismatch with what's really going on and what needs to happen at the policy and sort of up here level. So, yeah.
Good start. Rodney, you agree with that?
Totally. I think it's an appalling policy. Let's agree that we have got a really serious problem. We've got a very serious problem in our school. We've got a very serious problem with truancy. But we don't know quite what the problem is. And Mr. Seymour hasn't explained it. He's jumped to a solution, and his solution is literally to get a policeman to march a child into a school and say, you shall be educated from 9 till 3, and to growl at the parents with his baton or whatever. I mean, seriously, is that going to help that child's education? Is that going to help that child's situation? Is that going to help these parents? No, not at all. The first thing that you have to do if you're going to fix an issue like this is understand the problem. The problem isn't that the police aren't going around picking up truants and sending them to school. The problem is the kids are choosing not to go to school. That's the issue. Let's figure that out. I would say the schools will be most upset when some of these kids turn up to school, because they may actually destroy it for the rest of the classroom too.
Yeah. Okay, Simon, do you agree? We've got two saying the policy sucks. What do you reckon?
Well, I'm going to create a bit of tension. I actually don't mind this as a tool in the toolkit, and I'm probably influenced by a couple of school principals I know who have wanted this in different parts of the country. And I think that the key point for me is, firstly, to echo what both Ala and Rodney have said, that we've got to actually address the drivers for this, be it the children, what's happening in the parents. I mean, for me personally, often when you have truant children, it's in some ways a cry for help. And so you need to get the school, various agencies, social services involved to help. But unfortunately, there are some intransigent, often parents, who don't value education, who don't care less, and they don't suffer any consequences. And Ala's right. Up till now, the schools could choose to prosecute, but they don't and won't, because the ministry wasn't going to back them. So as an extra tool in the toolkit to be very rarely used, I'm comfortable with that. But I'd like to see a lot of intervention beforehand. So, yeah.
Okay. Ate?
I don't agree with this policy. I think it's terrible. I think this is another way of the government wanting to control people in the, in the home. Yes, there is a problem, but, acting as a police is disgusting. I mean, this is just the usual way the government now is moving into to control people's lives and families. Yes, there's a problem. The parents need to look into this and see what are some of the underlying problem why the kids are not wanting to go to school. But the blame shouldn't be on the teachers. Now teachers at school are not only teachers, they are counselor, they are parent, they are all sorts of responsibility, whereas they should be able and supported to teach maths and reading and, the stuff that we used to learn when we went to school. So big problem, but I just think that the government needs to just get out of there and stop controlling people and not acting as a police. People don't need that.
Okay, sorry, Simon, you are the loser tonight, 3-1. Although I actually think that part of the reason that they're having to give schools kind of some clout and more authority is because governments over successive terms have undermined parents with certain legislation. Rodney, you'd agree with me on this one, I'm sure, that when you introduce dumb things like being able to sneak kids away against their parents' wishes to get an abortion or to go on puberty blockers, or when you tell parents that if they affirm their daughters as girls that they could be committing conversion therapy, or when they say you can't discipline your child because your child will report you to a rangatamariki, we've just created the perfect storm, and this is the government trying to solve a problem that they created in the first place. Would that be correct, Rodney?
In big part, I think that's for, if you like, parents that are awake to what's going on. But I think we're also talking about at-risk parents who are struggling to cope and struggling to manage with their children. But then again, you have to ask yourself this: if a kid in a struggling household, why isn't school attractive to me? You'd surely think we'd be able to, with all the money that we're spending on education, we'd be able to make school attractive to a child compared to the alternatives. I don't think school is attractive to them. For many of these kids, going to school is a hazard. It's incredibly boring, and they don't appreciate it or enjoy it. I think the school is letting them down.
Okay.
I would agree.
Okay, well, let's just continue on this theme of schools. And part of the announcement has also said that schools, teachers can't have teacher-only days during the term. Maybe they have a teacher-only day during this current fortnight when they're on holiday for 2 weeks. You agree with that, Alla?
Oh my gosh, another dumb policy. I think, again, I don't know who's writing these policies, but whoever it is, they need to resign, leave the country, and never look back. Teachers have those teacher-only days for many schools are used as an opportunity to upskill. That is where a lot of schools do planning. I think we need to stop slagging teachers. I'm so disheartened that the way that how we treat teachers and value them has gone down over the years. Teachers play a huge role in shaping a child or a person's future and their character, and we just don't give them the kudos or even the support they need. I think has been previously mentioned, they're not just teaching anymore. They're dealing with behaviour management, their counsellors, their parents, they're feeding children. My goodness, they're doing everything that we don't think they're doing. And simply saying that, they get long holidays, they should fit in teacher-only days. I don't know if that's a good logic in terms of removing teacher-only days. And most schools don't use that as a day off for teachers. Teachers actually have to come in, they do planning, they do lesson plans, etc. So they're productive days for teachers, and they're opportunities for schools to be able to upskill teachers. So the fact that this is a policy, again, is stupid. I don't know where he's getting his advice from, obviously not from teachers, and to sort of say, fit it into your holidays. Well, when we go on holiday as a worker, we're not coming into work, so why should teachers have to do that? I feel for teachers. I feel like they've been slagged at for so long. I just don't know why we don't value them. They do so much. 80% of them are great. There are 20% that you're like, ugh, how did you get into teachers college and why did you get in? But a great number of our teachers actually make a big difference in the child's life, and we need to do more to get around them.
Okay, Simon, do you agree with that? Do you think teachers are getting a tough time, that they're having to carry the social breakdown in our families and in society?
I just need to say for the camera, Bob, that my wife is not standing next to me with a pistol. No, only kidding. Sorry, for people who don't know, my wife's a teacher. Yeah, look, yes to all of that. I mean, what teachers are having to do now is substantial. I think the policy doesn't make a lot of sense, partly for the practical reasons Ala mentioned. The whole idea that, in the middle of a school holiday, when actually they're still working and doing reports and planning, that they have to come back to do a teachers only day doesn't make sense. There is value into what they do. And schools do plan this in. I just make two, if you will, then general points. One is, if ACT in this case, or David Seymour's meant to be a libertarian, he really is spending an inordinate amount of time creating rules and regulations into this space. And there's an element to me, and I can't prove any of this, but it feels a little bit vindictive, actually, on teachers. And I just don't think it is appropriate.
Okay, Ate, did you want to add to this one, or shall we move on?
I just agree that this is a stupid policy, an example of bureaucrats making policies with no idea what's going on. So, teachers need to be supported, and the cuts to health and education is, it's just awful, and the children are going to suffer.
Okay, Rodney, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I want to be the one that disagrees with everyone. I love you all to bits. I love Arla. I love everything she says.
Excellent.
She's home. She's homeschooling, so she doesn't have that much confidence in our great teachers. But this, teacher-only days are a disgrace. They're an absolute disgrace. Because think of it from the parent's perspective. Mum and dad working. Thursday is a teacher-only day. What are the parents supposed to do? It creates absolute chaos. Now, they do have the school holidays. They do have a 9 till 3 day. It's not, I appreciate they're working, doing, preparing and all the rest of it. Well, some are. I imagine if you've taught standard 3 maths year in and year out, you're pretty good at it.
Hopefully.
When we saw what Radio New Zealand produced for what they're doing on these teacher-only days, it was pretty horrific. They'd be better off not having them. So I'm a believer that if they're being paid for 5 days a week, 9 till 3, they actually work with kids in front of them. And it's not hard to have 2 days. What have they got? 33 weeks of the year? 20 weeks holiday? Most of us get by with 2 or 3. I'm not picking on teachers. I'm just stating a reality. And how do parents feel when they're working from 7 in the morning till 6 at night, both parents working, 2 weeks holiday a year? Oh, teacher only day. No. I'm with Mr. Seymour. And I don't think it's a petty regulation. I do agree. He's an engineer, so he does have a bit of authoritarianism about him. But I don't think expecting people to teach when they're paid to teach is too much to ask.
Okay, let's move on. That was great. I love this disagreement. Makes it much more fun. Let's talk about Commissioner Andrew Costa, who has just stepped down. And is it Commissioner Costa or Cuddles Costa? And the reason I ask, and I'm just interested to see whether the police commissioner the position has become too political, and was it Andrew Costa's fault, or is it just the nature of the work? So here's for those who don't know, quick summary. Basically, after Black Lives Matter, he commissioned a report on understanding policing delivery using Kylie Quince, who's a well-known Marxist lecturer from AUT. Simon Bridges called him a wokester. Mark Mitchell said he was policing by consent, having cups of tea with with gang members. David Seymour called him Commissioner Gaslight. You might remember the random iwi checkpoints during COVID, and they sort of sent the cops up there to sort of almost legitimise them. Talked about backing off police chases, but then I think they changed that policy. Threatened to tow the parliamentary protesters' cars, but then didn't. I thought probably the worst part was that he said his proudest day was the police was the operation to end the parliament protests, which I just think that statement alone is kind of tone deaf, because it was a terrible day on both sides. But he does say police are more polarised and people are more polarised and angry since COVID. I might start at the political end. Simon, you were in Parliament when he was actually Commissioner of Police. What was the general feel? Was he doing the job? Actually, it was when Labor were in power, so he had to do what the Labor government was telling him to do, didn't he?
Well, no, strictly not. I mean, the police are meant to stand separate. They're under the control of the Crown, but they're meant to be separate. I mean, one of the biggest faults, particularly in COVID, was his very clear alignment with Jacinda and the Prime Minister, including sharing the stage, the same as Bloomfield. I mean, just symbolically and practically, they became intertwined. Unfortunately for him, because actually Andrew, as a person's a good man, and well-intentioned, and roads to hell and all of that stuff. But as a policing commissioner, it was a terrible failure, including for all the reasons you've put there. And police used to call him the lantern, that he burned brightly but had to be carried. And the fact that he had no frontline experience, didn't really know what the day-to-day officers were going through, really showed. And now we have a police force which is suffering very low morale. We are seeing significant attrition. These are problems inherited through his time. And you and I talked about this briefly last week. I think it's horrific, or horrid actually, that he looks to the parliamentary protest as something to say as a highlight of how he handled it. I mean, not only how they handled the protesters, but he sent police officers into a riot situation with inappropriate gear. And so it's not taking sides, but he let not only the public down, but he let his own officers down. He put them in harm's way. So I think very few will be sad to see him go, and that the government's done this quite elegantly, if you will, because they really just, sidestepped him into another role, which we can discuss another time if you like, but it's an elegant way to move him on.
Okay, Ate, I am pretty sure what you think. Being a Wellingtonian.
You become a mind reader, Bob. I totally agree. I think it's sad for Costa. He failed miserably. I just think it was so disgusting. So it's good that he's gone, but what he's left behind is just a big fail. And I don't know what's going to happen to our police force. We need good, strong leadership, gutsy people with courage, and that was not Costa. We've got a big problem with crime, and it's not the fault of the police, but I don't think that they can sort it out. But as far as Costa was concerned, really sad. But there you go, Jacinda.
Okay, the text machine's going just about blowing up from all the messages coming through. Ala, any thoughts? Do you think the police commissioner position became too political and was seen as kind of a yes person to the government of the day?
I don't have particular thoughts about the role, but I mean, it seems like under his reign, it did. Also, under his reign, our victims' numbers went up, but our offenders went down. So he kind of reminds me of being book smart versus street smart, and he was probably, his skills lean more towards being a desk cop rather than a street cop. So it makes sense with some of the feelings those in the operational side of the force feel towards him, and how he won't be missed is, I think, what the Police Association president said, which is telling. I think that particular role has no place for ideologues or ideologies, because they compromise the safety of our communities. Obviously, it's a role that carries many hats, strategy, operations, and dealing with various government agencies. So it needs to be somebody that, I firmly believe that role should always have someone that knows what happens on the front line, because our front line is changing rapidly and has changed rapidly over the past few years. So that experience is key, but they also need to have that sort of strong strategic and visionary element to their leadership, but also being able to rein in and work with other agencies. So, I think it seems like he's got a very strong policy background, which makes sense with his CV in terms of holding certain roles that weren't always frontline. So his skills probably are more useful in this new agency that he's going to.
Rodney, having spent time in Parliament, I mean, what we had a Minister of Police, which was, Stuart Nash, which then became Ginny Anderson, which was pretty scary. And then the government changed and it went to Mark Mitchell. So you've got a commissioner who's working under very different types of ministers. That must be quite tricky, isn't it?
Shouldn't be. The commissioner is relatively special, because they're appointed by the Governor-General and they can't be fired by the Cabinet. They can only be fired by the Governor-General. So that's to give them the protection that Simon was speaking about. So they should be not political. Of course, the police have always been extremely political in terms of getting more resources and getting what they want. This guy, though, was a generational failure. It's going to take years to correct the police force from his appalling administration, because we've had this diversity, equity and inclusion run right through the police, and so we have lost performance and ability. He was a commissioner that wanted to look good on the politics of the day rather than actually do good, rather than do good for the people of New Zealand and for the police that he was in charge of. You can summarise him in this way. He was very happy to have the rainbow tick, and he had the police stand by while an elderly woman was bashed. And women weren't allowed to speak freely. The police were there that day, and they stood by while an elderly woman was beaten. That is unforgivable for any police officer to do that, and for him to be the boss and find that acceptable. Why? Because he wanted to look good. Disgraceful man.
Okay, well, you'll be interested to know what position he's just taken on, and I'm going to get Simon to defend the organisation just before I trash it. He's going to an organisation called the, what is it, Simon? The Social Investment Agency.
Impact, isn't it?
So, yeah, something like that, which is
Social investment.
What is it, Simon?
Well, it's about the social investment philosophy, but I think the agency's called something like social impact. You put us all on the spot, Bob. I thought you did your research.
No, well, I just wanted you to explain it, that it was a great idea of Bill English's, and it was kind of like, well, what is it? It's kind of like a holistic approach to all the social problems, eh? Is that what it is?
In a
So
nutshell.
social investment is you've summed it up well. I mean, basically,
Thank you.
It's not simply through Bill English, but the idea is that you collate and look at the data of what is and is not happening, and then you put the funds in appropriately. So, Bill's sort of go-to example is, instead of funding prisons, why don't we put a lot of money up front into young people who need assistance? And so put the funding there, and you save money in time.
Okay. Ella, have you done a bit of work on it? Are you a bit aware of it?
A little bit. It seems like a prevention mechanism. So I've got a public health background, so I'm for it, but I don't know the details, so I'm not going to comment any further.
Okay. Well, just as well you're not, because I did a little bit of research and I found out that this new agency has got the rainbow tick, which is always a good start. And then when you go deep into it, it's even got a diversity, equity and inclusion plan. And one of its aims is to lift the number of rainbow people in the public service at all levels. So that sounds like it's going to be a stunning success. So maybe that's a good place for our ex-police commissioner to go. Right, team, we've got just a couple of minutes. Do you support a capital gains tax? There's been calls for it, but there's lots of exceptions, nuances, caveats. When most people hear about it, they sort of doze off and they think capital gains tax, as long as you don't touch my home or my holiday home, that's all okay. But nobody can quite understand what's going on. Actually, Rodney, were you something to do with finance when you were in the government?
Yes, indeed. And a capital gains tax is the worst possible tax you can ever implement on a society. Why? Because capital is extremely mobile. And if you tax capital gains, you actually lock in resources, because the tax typically only becomes payable when you sell them. The other problem with the capital gains tax, it's almost always and everywhere a double tax. Because if you have an asset, it's earning an income, that income gets taxed. It reflects the value of that income stream. If the income stream goes up, it increases in value. But that income stream is taxed. If you tax the capital gain, you're double taxing that income. It's a terrible tax. It's a shocking tax. The New Zealand Treasury have always been for it because they adopted the position of a note that Paul Samuelson wrote in 1964. And funnily enough, I wrote to Paul Samuelson. He's a Nobel laureate in economics. And he admitted that it meant nothing for New Zealand. And Treasury still stick with it. It's the stupidest, most horrible tax you could ever implement on a country.
Okay. Ali, you agree with that?
Yeah, Rodney's the expert. I think any opportunity that the government takes to take more money off people, I'm a bit cautious about it. So I don't know why it's come up again. My big concern is, well, what are we doing with our current public purse? Where are we putting people's taxes? Are we doing that efficiently, and why not? So I hate that the conversation doesn't steer that way. So I think we need to steer the conversation that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Figure out what we're spending on. Are we accountable for it? And then figure out the tax. I heard an interview with Chris Hipkins where he said it the other way around. We get the tax and see how much we can get, and then we go and spend it. But that's said like a true socialist, I guess. Ate, you support a capital gains tax?
The capital gains tax is a code word for stealing, government stealing from people. Honestly, I mean, there's some people who are already paying, $39 for every $100 they earn. Then you add on 15% for GST, then petrol tax, 70 cents per litre, 1% of earnings to ACC, 3 to 6% for inflation. And the Wellington City Council is proposing an 18% rate increase for the stuff up they're doing here in the city. So, you just wonder why people would want to work because the government is just continuing to steal. And what are they doing with the billions? The government for the billions that we are already paying tax for. So I think it's the most disgusting thing, and we should call it what it is. It's stealing from the people. And the government should, if they want to cut the waste, cut the waste and bureaucracy. I mean, Nicola Willis is hell-bent on this, billions that she's wanting to from tax cuts. Meanwhile, our health workers are suffering, the teachers are suffering, cuts in health and education. I mean, it's a complete stuff up. So sorry.
Okay. Finally, Simon, when you were a national, they wanted nothing to do with it, did they?
No, they haven't been supported. There are some who lean a bit towards it. They're clearly misguided. I just echo what everyone else has said. The government already takes in significant amounts of tax already. And look, capital gains taxes come with major problems down the line. And I was actually quite frustrated when I read the news last week. Was it the ANZ chief executive or chief economist who's saying, it's a good idea. Which, idiotic in itself to even make that statement. But then media later reports all the caveats that I think she had put in. And it's just like, this is the complexity of it all. Even if you do implement it, it's complex, it's bureaucratic, it's costly. But unfortunately, I think in the narrative in New Zealand, certainly across the last at least 2 elections, it's sort of been put forward as this amazing panacea to all our problems that, overnight, a capital gains tax will solve immigration and housing and everything. It won't. Things, I would argue, will get worse. And so we're going to break through that narrative.
Oh, that's what they told us during the cannabis debate as well, that the tax on cannabis, on all the spending on drugs, would solve addiction and provide hospitals and education. I mean, it was quite stunning what they were promising us. It was all lies, of course. Right. Sorry, I've got just a quick pile of these. Philippa says, when I was teaching, we had a teacher-only day the last day before term started. We had school open 400 half days a year. Now it's only 384 half days. There we go, Philippa, back in the good old days. Steve says, no cuddles at Parliament protest. Justine says, isn't he Jacinda's cousin? Is Andrew Costa Jacinda's cousin? Anyway, a few people have said that. Who knows? Liam says, the police are thoroughly political now. Glad to see Costa go. It's no wonder the police have lost respect and trust along with politicians and media. Good riddance. There we are, Simon and Rodney. Charmaine says, yes, that's damning. Costa needs to feel regret about the police's part in the parliamentary protest. I'm pleased to see him go. Mihi says, Ate, you should be Prime Minister. Be no humbug with you, mate. Our country will be safe again. Lisa says, police conspicuous by their absence at Kelly J. Keen's Let Women Speak event at Albert Park. Oh, that's where you got that statement from, Rodney. I knew you got it from somewhere. Liam said, glad Rodney says what needs to be said about Costa. Thank you. Sue says, thanks, Rodney, for the reminder about no police protecting women at Albert Park. Neil says, you're on fire, Rodney. You've presented the catastrophic Commissioner Costa succinctly and accurately. Ricky's wondering about our spelling. He can't see the small text to I get replacement glass. Okay. Spec savers, mate. Kirstine says they should apply capital gains tax only to our capital, Wellington. You've already got a capital gains tax, haven't you, Ate? It's called Tory Whanau. Sunnyside Up says, how about the government stop spending so much instead of trying to tax us more? That's what Arla said. Daryl says, big push for capital gains tax on the mainstream media tonight. They love to push the lefties' obsession with more taxes. And just as we're about to sign off, Ethel turns up and says, good evening, Family First. Ethel, nice to have you. If you've missed the program, don't worry, you can watch it online and on demand on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page and on our website. Our team, great evening. Thank you for that. Great job. Rodney, has it got dark yet or is it still light down there?
Dark.
Dark. Okay,
Got
finally. Dark. Okay, well done. Ala, you can get some sleep now, well-earned sleep. And thank you, Ate, Simon. Great job. And thank you for watching Straight Talk. See you next week at 8 o'clock. Have a great week. Yeah.